Welcome to the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions, now in its 27th season. Our panel features a longtime Penn State media and NitWits tag team, Neil Rudell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of Lions 24/7 with Fight on State. The NitWits are hosted by WTAJ's Andrew Clay, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By Remax Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction, if you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
Coming up, it's a new season of Nittany Nation Overtime, and on today's season preview show, we look ahead to the 2024 campaign, discuss breakout players and changes along the staff. Former Penn State wide receiver Joe Nastasi is with us, so let's get right into it. Nittany Nation Overtime kicks off now.
Hey, what I'm doing, hey, getting right to it. Yeah, the money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I drew it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there is no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, spin on live, you don't believe it, just watch.
Welcome inside the Nittany Nation studio. I'm Andrew Clay. Another new season of Nittany Nation Overtime right here on WTAJ. Mark Brennan, Neil Riddell, Joe Nastasi. It's the ultimate Nitwit crew, and it's an exciting new year for us here on this brand new set. It all looks beautiful. We're hoping Penn State looks as beautiful as our brand new looking set. I know you guys wanted to start off with predictions, and so let's get right into it. Neil, this was your idea, so let's start with you.
Ooh, okay. Well, I was going to defer to you because you probably have a higher prediction than me, and you know, I
Are you trying to hedge your
could be a
bets
wet blanket, but hey, I'm going to say 9-3. Okay, they got to prove it to me. I think there's a tough road schedule. You got 3 new coordinators. You know, opening up at West Virginia to me is not going to be an easy game, but it should be a really fun year. They're ranked 8th by the AP. The fact that you have a playoff, I think, changes the entire dynamic of the season. It's not just one loss, kind of the end of the world. But you know what? I'm picking 9-3. I could see it becoming 10-2, but for now,
he's already waffling.
Yeah.
You know, the ESPN FPI index has Penn State pretty handily winning every game but one. Guess which one? And, you know, I'm...
West Virginia.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
No, it's obviously Ohio State. But, you know, the game that I think... I'm going to pick 10-2, and I think the other game that I really worry about from Penn State's perspective is that USC game. You know, they've traveled in season over 1,000 miles once under James Franklin, and that was a loss to Nebraska. He's such a creature of habit, and they are so much about their routines. They're talking about possibly leaving from Harrisburg, maybe leaving earlier in the week, and I just think when they break routines, that's going to make things difficult out there at USC. So I'm picking 10-2 with the losses being Ohio State, USC.
Is it me?
I'm going to give it to you, Joe.
I'll tell you, well, you know, like I said, my heart, here's how I want to just preface it. My heart saying we're running the table. Now I say it every year, but I showed up in the khakis today, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm sort of with Neil on this one, and I hate to say it, but I'm not in love with a couple of parts of the season. I think it's a tougher schedule than I think a lot of people might look at and just say, well, that's a win and that's a win. I don't think that really exists in college football anymore, just based on the moving parts and the transfers and everybody that can kind of pick people out of space if they have to. And even like going down here to this West Virginia game, I'm glad it's at noon. I think that's a big benefit for us. But, I'm not in love with that game. Ohio State's Ohio State. And then I don't like that stretch between, that away at USC, Wisconsin, and then that Purdue game. There's some work to be done in there. So, again, you have to line up and play every day. So I'm going to go with a 9-3.
Wow, that's the exact opposite of what we all expected out of you.
I said 12-0 was my heart.
Sure. I'm a 10-2 guy. I think maybe it's a cop out.
Got a border war here.
Maybe it's a cop out to go 10-2 because that's just an easy pick right now. But look, you mentioned the schedule. It is one of the toughest schedules Penn State has had under James Franklin, and that's actually stats. Looking back at last season's winning percentage, opponent winning percentage based off last season, Penn State's opponents won better than 60% of their games last year. Mm-hmm. That is the toughest schedule they've had under James Franklin. I stopped doing the research because I figured I might not find another date over 60%. So this is a tough schedule. I think 10-2 you should be happy with, and it gets you squarely into the playoff. I don't think there's any doubt about that, given how different the SEC is, how different the Big Ten is this year. One loss isn't going to be the only loss you can take anymore. It's just not going to be that way with a 12-team field.
Well, if you've had 2 losses the last few years, you would have been in.
Sure.
I think you make an excellent point about his routine.
For once.
But here, with the playoff now, if you presume a loss to Ohio State, and if they could get to that point undefeated, James hasn't been great. He hasn't been great in the big games, okay? Ohio State, Michigan. There's going to be more big games this year. Suddenly Purdue, Minnesota, if you've already had a loss or 2, are bigger games. So I think it's going to make for a really interesting season. But some of these big games, you look back, Minnesota a few times has not viewed as a big game, but turned out to be one.
Illinois.
Yeah.
I think if you take, though, the name Michigan, Ohio State off this big game record, it's very different. I think it's James Franklin has not been good against Michigan and Ohio State. I feel like big game is almost a little unfair. They did just win a Rose Bowl 2 years ago.
I would also say that when you're talking about big games, they avoid Michigan and Oregon. So
huge.
That's gigantic.
But most people do lose to Michigan and Ohio State the last few years, so hey, I get it. We're Penn State. We want to run the table. I think we should run the table every year. We have the talent. I don't think we're any different than the other team with talent. I think we have the talent to win it all. Ours has come down to quarterback receiver situation in the last couple of years. We'd have a couple titles. We've had the defense to do it year after year.
Well, I think, you're measured against Ohio State and Michigan. And I agree about Oregon. It's changing the dynamics more. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you got to go to Wisconsin, USC, even Purdue, Minnesota back-to-back in November. And I'm concerned about the West Virginia game.
Hey, one thing I'd throw out there is you look at how tough Penn State's schedule is. Look at what those former Pac-12 teams are dealing with. The travel is just absolutely ridiculous. So you wonder what some of these teams are going to have in the tank.
While we're talking about this quick, Lee, our director back there, I want to jump ahead quick to this full screen, talk quickly about expanded playoffs. Remember this year, it is a 12-team format. Top 5 champions earn the automatic bids. Top 4 get the top 4 seeds. The quarterfinals and the semifinals effectively replace the New Year's 6. Guys, we've heard playoff or bust in recent years. It's absolutely, though, playoff or bust now that 12-team are in.
Yeah, I think James Franklin's on the hot seat if they don't make it, right? They have to get in. And, I also think it's important for them to get a home game. If you get one of these teams from a different region of the country in Beaver Stadium in mid-December, how awesome is that going to be for Penn State?
Well, if you're planning to get a home game, you better not have 2 losses because those teams are going to be ranked probably 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah, 5 to 9, right?
Let's see how it plays out.
I actually think 3 losses can get you into the playoffs. I do because
could be a home game.
I think you're not going to be home then, but I think given that the SEC and the Big Ten have gotten so much tougher since last year, I do think 3 losses are going to get you that 10, 11, 12 seeds.
It's going to depend on who you lose to as well.
And
that's true.
And how bad you lose.
Right.
Yeah, well, we're not expecting them. I say 3 losses, but I'm not counting them losing to an Illinois or a Purdue. I'm talking the USC, the Washington game.
Or the Big Ten championship.
Big Ten championship,
Right.
possibly.
Maybe something if you could get, slide in. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Before we run to our first break, let's talk quickly about the change of coaches. This was the big storyline. It's been the big storyline since December. 3 new coordinators, Justin Lustig, Andy Kotelnicki, and Tom Allen. Guys, what have been your first reactions to the changing of the coaching staff?
I think Kotelnicki, just a whole different personality. We talked about it last year that, Yurcich didn't seem to quite fit in. This guy, I know you've been around, Andrew, the outgoing, dynamic personality that he has and the way that he's able to relate to players. You see the things he's doing out on the field during practice, just high energy, throwing some F-bombs around here and there, having fun. There's
Boxing glove in practice.
Yeah, there's just an element of, you could tell that he's kind of having fun. And the other thing that I would say is you talk to Drew Allar, and he just seems to have a better feel. He's more at home talking about what he's doing under Kotelnicki than he ever was under Yurcich. He's a very smart kid, but you never quite knew what he was getting at. And now when he's talking about Kotelnicki's offense, it's like, okay, now I get it.
I think we don't know yet. I mean, it's not a personality contest. I mean, definitely Kotelnicki impressed everybody at his kind of winning the press conference debut. But I want to see, here they are on the road. You're going to have different communications through the headset, which is cool, so you don't have to see 85 signs on the sideline. So, plus, the Big 12 was not known for defense, and Kotelnicki, rolled up some numbers at Kansas. He did a good job at Buffalo. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Has to be an improvement.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm again with Neil on this. I'm telling you, I am. I'm the same way. I mean, I'm very optimistic. Just how I live, that's how I view our program. But again, I mean, it's one thing to have someone be good on the media stage, and it's another one when you're on the road at USC and we're down 3 and we need to drive. So again, we'll just see what happens as the season goes on. I'm excited about it. I think it's a good upgrade for sure. But I'm just, I'm excited about seeing what we're going to do.
Well, let's put a pin in it there. When we come back from the macro to the micro, we'll dive more into the details, including what we expect out of Drew Allar. That when Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
The NitWits are being brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. And by Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Back here on Nittany Nation Overtime. Remember, you can always keep up all the date with all things Nittany Nation over on the Nittany Nation app. Gentlemen, pull out your phones, use the QR code on your screen, and that'll take you over to download that on Apple and Android. Guys, we're going to talk about positions of strength here in a second, but let's talk about Drew Allar. Word of the day, write this down, enigma. I think Drew Allar has been an enigma as well as his stats have looked. He's still received tons of criticisms over the last season, 2 seasons.
I mean, I'm not sure that's fair to say enigma. To me, he was first-year starter last year. Certainly, I want to see incomplete, what more he can do. He didn't throw the ball downfield much, had a low...
Should you or should you not intentionally throw the ball downfield?
Well, I think he had a low completion, low yards per attempt, but he did protect the ball. This is the year for him. I mean, I think this is going to really define the kind of quarterback he is.
They have to
I
let
think
him
he's
go.
been good, but not great.
Yeah, they have to let him go. You can't tell us they have all these weapons and then you're not going to use them. And that's where I think the Kotelnicki, and again, we'll see. I completely agree. The proof's going to be in the pudding. But that's where if what Kotelnicki's talking about being able to get the ball in the hands of your best playmakers in maybe not the most obvious situation, when the entire stadium is expecting Nick Singleton to run, maybe you throw a pass to Tyler Warren. So that's what I think is going to be the key. But I think this is a big kid. He's more athletic than you think, super smart. Give him the opportunity to succeed, even if that means messing up every once in a while and maybe throwing an interception or two.
Yeah. Coaching and scheme hand in hand with how well the player does. And vice versa. Those guys can really make each other look good. So if it's a good fit, then I think you're going to see something, I don't want to say totally different, but you're going to see a lot more progress from year 1 to 2 based on the OC situation.
It's hard to be sure exactly what this offense will look like. We've all agreed on that. But if you go back and watch Kansas's tape from years past, they run a lot of pistol, a lot of RPO. And RPO is advanced into a way in which you don't need a mobile quarterback because the run part is usually a handoff and then the pass part. You don't have to be a quarterback that runs the ball and runs the QB read. I think that's going to allow Drew Allar to read his key and make a decision. We talk a lot about how smart he is. I think if he is forced to just make one decision and either hand the ball off to one of his great running backs or throw a quick pass, I think that actually works for him really, really well. I think it's a little bit what, on our podcast this week, was referenced, Tom Hannafin referenced it to like Oregon's offense of, 10 years ago under Chip Kelly. So I'll be really interested to see what happens, but I actually do think Kotelnicki's scheme works for a lot of quarterbacks, and I think it really can work for Drew.
Well, James has already talked about Drew being able to make a couple first downs with his legs. He's been pushing this ever since he's at Hackenberg. So we'll see what Allar lost 10 pounds. They're trying to get him to be maybe a little bit quicker in the pocket. We'll see what kind of effect that has.
Let's talk quickly about positions of strength, guys. Where do you think Penn State really stacks up well?
Offensively, I think the offensive line is, even though they lost some really good players, they're going to be 8 or 9 deep, and I think they're going to be able to rotate guys in, and I would look out for Anthony Donka. This is an offensive tackle who never played the position until the bowl game last year, and I think he has a chance to be really good. I know that may not be the sexiest pick, but I think when you're talking about a team in the Big Ten, I think the offensive line is going to be good, and I think it's going to bode well for him.
I think it has to be running back. They talked about not getting the ball to Singleton last year, certainly enough in the biggest moments. To me, you're going to West Virginia, where, if the crowd gets encouraged there, it'll make it more of an uphill climb. To me, you got to run the ball.
Yeah, offense side of the ball, I'm agreeing with both of you. To win now and to win in November, we have to be able to run the ball, and running the ball is good running back, good offensive line. And I think we have both of that, and the depth is important because you're always going to get nicked up here and there. So having some depth is important, just like you're saying, offensive line. I remember the days we were pulling defensive linemen over to play offensive line. That's not a good spot to be in. So run the ball and offensive line.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but to go with something different, I'm going to say the safety room is probably one of the best in the country, and I think it'll allow Tom Allen to get just a little bit more creative on defense when he's got players that can do so much and be so versatile.
Andrew, don't be surprised if they start 3 safeties.
I think they will. I think 4-2-5 has been Tom Allen's calling card for a lot of his career. I think that continues this season. Let's take another quick break. From strengths to weaknesses, we're talking about the backside of Penn State, plus the breakout players. Did one guy go underlooked last year? Maybe just a tease right there. Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
The NitWits are being brought to you by RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry. The answer is always Dorman's. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. And by Harry's Construction. If you can dream it, we can create it.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Well, back here on Nittany Nation Overtime again, Joe Nastasi, Neil Riddell, Mark Brennan, I'm Andrew Clay. Guys, we talked about points of strength in the last block. What about points of weakness?
Yeah, I hate to call it a weakness, but I just think they need guys to step up at wide receiver. Trey Walls, he kind of proved himself late last season, but I just think overall they need more depth than that. I think the players are there to do it, but again, we haven't seen it, so let's see if they're able to step up.
Hasn't mentioned Fleming a lot. I'm questioning the place kicking situation. To me, it's Xander missed a couple against West Virginia. Hopefully he can get off to a good start, if it's him.
I got to say receiver position. I don't think, everywhere else we've seen solid depth, but receiver, again, you're going to have to show us this year.
How about some players that are off the radar right now, Mark?
Andrew Rapplier, he redshirted last year. Any other program, he probably would have played, but Penn State was so loaded at tight end. They call this guy Baby Gronk, and not just because he's big and physical, but because he's a little bit crazy in a good way. Just a really outgoing personality, but don't be surprised. Tyler Warren's going to have a big year, but watch for Andrew Rapplier to play well as well.
I'm going to go with Smith Vilbert. I know it sounds like a law firm, but he tore up in the bowl game a couple of years ago. He's been on the radar since. They mentioned him, but he hasn't been there. So hopefully he'll be a difference maker this year.
And I'm going to say the
Davian Collins.
Collins,
yeah.
There we go. He transferred in corner.
Last year, yeah.
Yep. So probably under the radar guy in the defense, probably going to get a lot of time. Nobody's talking about him.
I'm going to go with Tony Rojas. Rojas didn't start last season or played more sporadically, a lot more on special teams. He's going to be a starter this year. He's got the physical tools to be the next great linebacker. I really think he could be that guy and could have a huge year. Of course, Penn State opens the season up next Saturday at West Virginia. When we come back, it is our picks. Let's talk Mountaineers. Penn State won this one big last year. Will they do it again? We'll talk about it when Nittany Nation Overtime returns.
Don't miss a minute of Nittany Nation Overtime, now also on Apple and Spotify.
The NitWits are being brought to you by Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
One last block here on Nittany Nation Overtime. Guys, it's time to make our West Virginia predictions. And the host seat, my seat that I occupy today, has now, I think, won 2 Nitwits of the year in a row. I'm just saying.
You, Ryan,
Congrats.
and Anderly.
Yeah. So let's get out, and I'll get my first prediction. Last year, I believe it was 38-15. We talked about. I'm not going far from that. I'm going with 35-18.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Neil?
I see it a little closer to that. I'm going to say 28-27.
Wow.
I think West Virginia is going to be ready to play. I'm sure their crowd
is that Penn State, 28-27?
Hey, yeah. West Virginia won 5 of their last 6. They got a returning quarterback, some experience. Maybe Penn State will have a little cushion in the fourth quarter, but 28-27.
I have a pretty good feel for that this offense is going to play well. I may be wrong, and we'll see. You may be wrong. Any of us may be wrong, but I don't think it's going to be completely smooth. But I think ultimately Allar and company and Kotelnicki get rolling. I'm going to pick Penn State 31-17.
Huh. Early in the year, anything can happen. Going on the road. If this was home, I'd feel a lot better about it. I'm going to go 27-20. Penn State's going to be a 1-score game. I think that, it's not maybe going to go exactly how we want it to go and just push it down the field like we want to. And I think they're going to score some points and keep it tight. So I'm going to go 27-20 Penn State.
Well, it's been a minute since West Virginia's beaten a ranked team at home. So we'll see how that plays out.
Hey, real quick, we talked about strengths earlier. I think we had a shout out to the punter, Riley Thompson.
Team captain.
Yeah, he should be a good factor in the kicking game.
Penn State has a good punter. Who would ever guess? Maybe punter you it is now. Of course, next time we'll have Nittany Nation Overtime on this air. It'll be after that game against the Mountaineers. So we'll see you then. For Joe Nastasi, Neil Riddell, Mark Brennan, I'm Andrew Clay. Thanks for watching.
The NitWits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction. If you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.